Yo, Andrew Berry cooked again, man. He keeps on impressing me this offseason. This time he impresses me by going out to get who I think is the most underrated running back in the NFL. He impresses me this time by going out to get a guy who has been one of my favorite running backs to watch over the past 3 years. And he impresses me by going out to get a guy who I think is going to bring so much to the Browns running back room and running game this season, everybody. Give it up for Andrew Berry because the Browns and Andrew Berry just cooked in the kitchen and signed Deontay Foreman to a 1-year deal to bring him a part of a Browns running back room that already has Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, and then Nyheim Hines, who they just signed. Look, man, if I had to give a grade for this deal, I don't know if it's an A. I don't know if it's an A minus, but I could tell you one thing. It's not anything below an A minus. I love this deal for the Browns for multiple reasons. Reason number one being just looking at the Browns' current circumstances with Nick Chubb and just not knowing if Nick Chubb is going to be there for the first quarter or half of the season. I think bringing Deontay Foreman in with that uncertainty is the perfect move. I think given Deontay Foreman's resume and the Browns' current circumstance, I think those two things coincide very well for the Browns, and I think it was a very smart move to bring in Deontay Foreman. Now, what has Deontay Foreman done for me to be so excited about the Browns bringing him in? Well, I got two nuggets for you guys. Deontay Foreman has produced 80 yards or more in every game with at least 16 carries since 2022. So look, the dude is obviously productive, but I think more specifically, he's shown you that he's productive when you ask him to take over a majority of the carries. And I think that's something the Browns are really going to need this year. Deontay Foreman has shown you that if he needs to be that number one guy in the running game, he can do that for you very efficiently, very productively. And, for example, the season I really want to highlight for Deontay Foreman is this 2022 season with the Panthers. In that season, obviously, Christian McCaffrey got traded midseason to the 49ers, and the Panthers needed a running back to step up and keep their running game steady. They called upon Deontay Foreman to be the starter midseason, and to finish that season, Deontay Foreman in only 9 starts finished the season with 914 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 4.5 yards per carry. So, ladies and gentlemen, the impressive thing about that is not only that Deontay Foreman was able to be productive with only starting 9 games in that season, but I think what really stands out to me here is that when the Panthers needed to call upon a guy to keep their run game running steady and efficiently, when they needed a guy to step up for whatever reason, their elite running back was not available, Deontay Foreman was a guy they were able to call upon to still keep the run game steady when their number one back was not there. And is that not what the Browns are going to need if Nick Chubb is not going to be able to play the first half or quarter of the 2024 season? So like I said before, I think Deontay Foreman's resume being what it is and seeing that he's been able to step up and be the number one running back when your number one running back was not available for whatever reason they were not available, Deontay Foreman was able to step up and be very productive in that role where he had to take over a majority of the carries. And given the Browns situation, they need a guy like that. They go out and sign a guy who's done that before in Deontay Foreman. And I think it's an incredible move by them. Now, I think what also needs to be talked about is even when Nick Chubb comes back, you are still going to need a guy that could take a burden off of Nick Chubb's shoulders. Deontay Foreman is absolutely a guy that I believe can do that for Nick Chubb. Not only because, he's shown us that he can be productive as a starter, but, he's been able to be productive in a backup role before, and he's just a talented guy. Now, one thing obviously we need to talk about here is Jerome Ford, because obviously a lot of things change here for Jerome Ford. Either the Browns are planning on trading him or they're planning on keeping him. Now, what do they do with him if they are to keep Jerome Ford, everybody? Now, there's a lot of Browns fans right now that still think Jerome Ford is the man. They still think he's the number 2 guy. And maybe the Browns think the same thing. There's a lot of people that right now still think Jerome Ford is a better running back than Deontay Foreman. There's a lot of people that think Deontay Foreman is just here to be the short yardage goal line running back. News flash. And this is just my opinion. I don't know if the Browns think the same thing, but I feel that given what Deontay Foreman has shown us throughout his career, he's the better running back. He should be your number 2 on paper. Obviously, he has to show you something in training camp, but I feel Deontay Foreman should be the number 2 running back going into the season. And that's mainly because not only do I feel his ceiling is higher than Jerome Ford, because Deontay Foreman can be just as explosive as Jerome Ford, and that's why we really like Jerome Ford. When Jerome Ford is making his money, it's on explosive plays. Deontay Foreman can do the same thing, everybody. In 2022, when he was the starting running back for the Panthers for half of that season, Deontay Foreman was fourth among running backs in explosive play rate. And, that just shows you that, yeah, we consider Deontay Foreman to be a power back, but he's not limited to just that. But I also like Deontay Foreman more, not only because his ceiling is higher, but because I also feel like his floor is higher. And I feel like Foreman's floor is higher because, he's a more downhill north field runner compared to, Jerome Ford, where we wish he didn't lack that ability. He's not a very physical running back. He's not a very good physical downhill running back. I think a lot of times last year, because Ford was not and is not a north field downhill runner, you'd see a lot of his plays start behind the line of scrimmage and then end up behind the line of scrimmage. Not only because he wasn't physical enough to power through tacklers downhill, but also because he didn't have good enough vision to necessarily move forward. He wasn't a decisive runner either. He wasn't willing to get physical or absorb downhill contact. And I also feel like he wasn't a very good one-cut running back either. And all of those traits go into being a good north field downhill runner. All of those traits are traits that Deontay Foreman possesses. And because Ford did not possess those downhill traits last year, you saw a lot more negative gains because he could not consistently run north of the line of scrimmage. Last year, Jerome Ford was third most in the NFL in terms of stuff runs, second most in the NFL in terms of tackles for loss, and then he had the most tackle for loss yards in the NFL. Now, all of that being considered, that's why Deontay Foreman's floor is higher, because he's a better downhill runner and not only more physical, but more willing to be physical. There's a lot less of a chance of negative plays with Foreman on a down-to-down basis, where his worst-case scenario is either a 0 to 2 yard gain, compared to Jerome Ford, where your worst-case scenario on a down-to-down basis with him is at most a 3 to 4 yard loss, because he's an inconsistent downhill runner, and we saw that last year. That's not good for your offense either, to have a guy that's prone to giving up tackles for loss, because the more you lose yards on earlier downs, the harder it is not to only convert third downs, but also avoid third downs because of all of the yards you have to get back from a negative run. I just don't think the Browns offense can afford to go through that again. All in all, I think Deontay Foreman has proven to be less prone to negated plays, and that's why his worst is better than Ford's worst, and Ford's worst, or his floor, sets your offense back compared to, Deontay Foreman. His worst doesn't necessarily set you back as much as Jerome Ford's worst sets you back. And, I don't want to just go all out on Jerome Ford, because I still think he has a lot of potential. I think, like I said before earlier in this video, a reason you like Jerome Ford is because he's definitely a guy who can make big plays. You see that. He's able to win at the line of scrimmage a lot of times because he is very elusive. And if he gets a good block, he can make some plays. Although he's not consistent with his vision, he can make some good reads through the offensive line at times, and his elusiveness is really good. But at the same time, he has a tendency to just have negated plays, and I don't think the Browns offense can really afford to have that. And that's no shot at Jerome Ford, because I still think he's a solid player. I think he still has time to develop and grow in this league, and I still think he's going to be a crucial third down running back for this team this year, because he is elusive, he is explosive, he is a good receiving back. And I think he's going to be crucial if Nick Chubb is not able to go. I think he'd be a good number 2 third down back to Deontay Foreman. I just don't think Jerome Ford is the guy who needs to be out there more often, especially as a feature back, because he just leaves way too much room for chaos and negative yards. So the less you have him out there, the less potential you have for plays like that happening compared to Deontay Foreman, because he's a downfield, north field runner. You have less room for chaotic and, yard losing plays. I think Deontay Foreman is easily the better running back. I think if you were in a situation where Nick Chubb is out, I think Deontay Foreman needs to be getting the most carries when it comes to either him or Jerome Ford. Obviously, I think Jerome Ford needs to be the third down running back, but I think Deontay Foreman needs to be out there more often. He gives you everything Jerome Ford gives you, plus more. And, I still like the Foreman and Ford combo. I think if you had to go to that, it'd be cool, because you have a good mix of a power back who can be explosive, and then a good elusive and explosive back in Jerome Ford. So I think that situation would be really good for the Browns. All in all, though, the Browns, if they're going to keep Deontay Foreman through training camp, which I think they should, I think it's a no-brainer. Now, obviously, the Browns now have some arranging to do in their running back room. Now you have a running back room where you have Nick Chubb, Deontay Foreman, Jerome Ford, Nyheim Hines, and Pierre Strong, who showed flashes for us last year. So, you know, my preferred situation for the Browns is, if Nick Chubb has to start the season on the PUP list, then you just roll into the season with Foreman and, Ford as your third down back. I think you keep Nyheim Hines on the roster. I think you keep him as that extra running back, and you maybe cut James Prochet and allow Nyheim Hines to be your returner because he's so good at it. And because, Nyheim Hines is going to be your returner and you cut James Prochet, because of that, I think that gives you a chance to also keep Pierre Strong and have four, running backs if Nick Chubb is not able to start the year. Which, if Nick Chubb is able to start the year, then I think it needs to just be, Chubb, Foreman, Ford, and then Hines. Maybe you even trade Jerome Ford. So we'll see what happens there. But I think obviously Foreman needs to prove himself in training camp. But, I think the Browns should be in a mindset right now where they're anticipating Deontay Foreman being on the roster heading into week 1. I think another reason why I really love this deal for Deontay Foreman is because in Carolina, when we saw him have his best year, that was with now Browns running back coach Deuce Staley, who was in Carolina when, Deontay Foreman had his best year in Carolina. So I think the continuity is there. You put Deontay Foreman with a guy who he worked with really well. But everyone, that was all for me. I really love this signing for the Browns right here, getting Deontay Foreman, adding him to the running back room. I think he's an incredibly explosive back who's also mainly a power back, but I think it's incredible that he can still make guys miss, be explosive, and make big plays. But you guys tell me what you think down in the comment section below. Other than that, this has been Malik Hicks, aka The Ranker of Dogs by the Sword, signing off. Peace out, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace.